Hi, my name is Yurii. I'm the creator of this channel. If you love exploring history, make sure you like and subscribe. It really motivates me to create more content for you. Let's dive in.
The fall of the Soviet Union, December 26, 1991. On the evening of December 25, 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev sits alone at his vast Kremlin desk. The cold light of a single lamp illuminates the document before him, his resignation as president of the USSR. The sprawling office is eerily quiet, the usual hum of activity silenced as a camera crew waits patiently just outside. He signs the paper, the pen scratching softly, acutely aware that in less than an hour, he will deliver the speech that officially dissolves a nation of 290 million people. This silent, solitary act marked the end of an empire. But the story of its collapse began much earlier, with a slow, grinding decline. For decades, this vast empire, stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Pacific Ocean, had been a world unto itself. Its iron grip held 15 republics and nearly 290 million people in a singular, unyielding embrace. Daily life across this immense territory, from the frozen plains of Siberia to the fertile fields of Ukraine, was dictated by the central authority in Moscow. The Communist Party, an invisible hand in every corner, controlled production, information, and destiny. The KGB, its watchful intelligence arm, ensured conformity, its shadows, long even in the brightest Leningrad squares. Routines were predictable: queues for necessities, state-assigned housing, mandated labor. The rewards were often minimal, the privileges reserved for a select few within the nomenklatura, the party elite. Yet beneath the surface of this ordered existence, a profound stagnation had taken root by the mid-1980s. The Soviet Union on the brink was a colossus with feet of clay. Its command economy, once a source of pride, was now a chronic generator of shortages and inefficiencies. Factories in Sverdlovsk produced goods nobody wanted, while basic consumer items remained scarce in shops across Kazan. This vast system was plagued by an unsustainable arms race with the West, draining away resources that could have fed its people or modernized its infrastructure. The rigid, centralized hierarchy, while maintaining control, stifled innovation and suppressed any meaningful dissent. The political structure in Moscow was sclerotic, dominated by an aging Politburo, seemingly incapable of adapting to the changing world of the 1980s. The entire apparatus groaned under its own immense weight, an empire held together by ideological dogma and sheer force. Then, in March 1985, a new figure emerged from the Kremlin's corridors, Mikhail Gorbachev. At 54, he was a stark contrast to his octogenarian predecessors. He ascended to power with a desperate, radical vision to revitalize the ailing system, not to dismantle it. His policies, perestroika, economic restructuring, and glasnost, political openness, were intended as a lifeline for the Soviet Union. Perestroika aimed to introduce market elements, decentralize decision-making, and boost productivity, hoping to breathe life into the stagnant economy of cities like Minsk and Tashkent. Glasnost, however, would prove to be the truly revolutionary force. Glasnost dramatically altered daily life across the Soviet Union. From strict censorship, the media shifted towards unprecedented freedoms. Newspapers in Moscow and Tbilisi began to publish articles discussing social problems, corruption, and even historical injustices previously deemed unspeakable. Public discussion, once confined to hushed whispers in kitchens, spilled into the open, in parks and public squares across the 15 republics. This new transparency, however, soon delivered a brutal shock. On April 26, 1986, the Chernobyl disaster occurred, a catastrophic explosion at reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near Pripyat, Ukraine. The initial cover-up by Soviet officials, lasting days, only magnified the horror when the truth eventually emerged under the pressure of glasnost. The disaster exposed the profound systemic flaws, the dangers of secrecy, and the technological shortcomings of the Soviet system to the entire world, and to its own citizens in a way never before possible. While Gorbachev focused on reform in the Kremlin, the periphery of the vast empire was already voting with its feet, demonstrating that the center's authority was weakening and often irrelevant. In 1988, ethnic tensions erupted into violent conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, a region claimed by both Armenia and Azerbaijan, revealing Moscow's inability to control internal strife. A year later, on August 23, 1989, a breathtaking display of peaceful defiance occurred. 2 million people across Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia formed the Baltic Way, a human chain stretching over 600 kilometers, demanding independence and commemorating the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact that had led to their annexation. By 1990, even the industrial heartlands were rebelling, with massive miners, strikes crippling coal production in places like Donetsk, Ukraine, and the Kuzbas region of Russia, demanding better conditions and political freedoms. These parallel cracks, appearing simultaneously across the empire, showcased a Soviet Union increasingly unable to respond or even acknowledge the centrifugal forces tearing it apart. As the Soviet Union's grip visibly weakened, the cracks began to appear not only internally but across its satellite states. The symbolic highlight of this unraveling came on November 9, 1989, when the Berlin Wall, a stark physical manifestation of the Iron Curtain, fell. This event in Berlin, Germany, sent shockwaves through Eastern Europe and into the heart of the Soviet Union, signaling that the old order was crumbling. The weakening of Moscow's authority was palpable, and the fear that once held diverse populations in check began to recede. Across the vast expanse of the Soviet Union, independence movements rapidly gained momentum. From the Caucasus to Central Asia, long-suppressed nationalism and historical grievances surged to the forefront. These movements were particularly strong in the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. These three nations, forcibly annexed by the Soviet Union in 1940, had never truly accepted Soviet rule. In Vilnius, Lithuania, figures like Vytautas Landsbergis led a powerful singing revolution, using cultural expression to demand sovereignty. In March 1990, Lithuania declared its independence, a bold move that Moscow initially tried to suppress, with economic blockades and military intimidation. Mikhail Gorbachev found himself in an impossible dilemma, caught between hardline communists in Moscow, clinging to the old order, and the increasingly vocal pro-independence factions in places like Riga and Tallinn. The ultimate risk materialized in August 1991. While Mikhail Gorbachev was on vacation in Crimea, a desperate cabal of hardliners, including KGB chief Vladimir Kryuchkov and Defense Minister Dmitry Yazov, formed the State Committee on the State of Emergency, GKCHP. Their goal was to depose Gorbachev, halt the reforms, and restore the old centralized order. On August 19, 1991, tanks rolled into Moscow. Yet, this desperate gamble immediately met fierce resistance. At 12:30 p.m. on that very day, outside the Russian White House, Boris Yeltsin, then president of the Russian SFSR, famously climbed atop Tank 110, defying the coup plotters and galvanizing public resistance. His brave stand, broadcast globally, became a rallying cry. That night, despite a steady rain, thousands gathered outside the White House, singing songs of freedom and forming human shields, determined to protect their nascent democracy. The coup plotters' resolve crumbled under the weight of this popular opposition and the military's divided loyalties. Many soldiers, ordered to suppress the crowds, refused to fire on their own people, turning their tanks around, or even joining the protesters. The putschists found themselves isolated, their authority evaporating with each passing hour. On August 22, 1991, the desperate situation culminated in the suicide of Interior Minister Boris Pugo, a stark symbol of the coup's abject failure. By August 21st, the coup had collapsed. This failure irrevocably shattered Moscow's central authority, demonstrating the irreversible decline of the system. Mikhail Gorbachev returned from Crimea to a country that no longer recognized his central authority, a union fundamentally altered by the events of those 3 tumultuous days. In its wake, he resigned as head of the Communist Party on August 24, 1991, effectively dissolving its power and rendering it irrelevant. With central authority evaporated, the remaining republics rapidly declared independence, fearing further attempts to restore the old regime. Boris Yeltsin, having successfully defied the coup, rose to unprecedented prominence, consolidating power within Russia. The Baltic states, having endured years of struggle, saw their formal independence recognized by Moscow in September 1991, a profound victory for Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. The final act unfolded swiftly. On December 8, 1991, in the Belovezha forest near Vyskoly, Belarus, the leaders of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, Ukraine, Leonid Kravchuk, and Belarus, Stanislav Shushkevich, signed the Belovezha Accords. This historic document recognized each other's independence and declared the Soviet Union defunct, simultaneously forming the Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS. Mikhail Gorbachev, the architect of reforms that ultimately led to the system's demise, delivered his resignation speech as president of the USSR from the Kremlin on December 25, 1991. His leadership had come to an end. The very next day, on December 26, 1991, the Supreme Soviet of the USSR formally voted itself out of existence. The Soviet Union, an empire that had dominated global affairs for nearly 70 years, officially ceased to exist. On that final December evening in 1991, the red flag bearing the hammer and sickle was lowered from the Kremlin flagpole in Moscow for the very last time. It was replaced by the white, blue, and red tricolor of the Russian Federation. The silence that followed was deafening, marking the dramatic and unforeseen end of an era that had begun just 6 years prior with the promise of reform.